we're on the second part of our discussion about Islam and modernity. Before we get started, let's introduce you guys again. Do you want to go first?
My name is Imam Muhammad Tawhidi. I am a reformist ordained scholar, and I spent nearly 12 years of my life studying Islam in the Middle East, a third generation Muslim Imam, and I travel the world. I'm very involved in interfaith diplomacy, and I do have reformist ideas that I like to discuss. I've just released a book, The Tragedy of Islam, and I'm in New York with Brother Daniel and Brother Armin discussing whether or not Islam poses a threat to modernity.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. My name is Daniel Haqiqatjou. I'm a speaker, lecturer, and researcher on Islam and modernity. I did my undergraduate degree at Harvard University, where I studied physics and double majored in philosophy as well. And I pursued graduate studies in philosophy, studying Western philosophy, Islamic philosophy. I've spent the last 10 years discussing, debating, teaching on the challenge that modernity poses to Islam and how Islam responds to that challenge in a way that is authentic to the tradition of Islam, the long history, Sunni tradition of Islam of 1400 years, and how that response is compelling, rationally and morally. And I speak to both Muslims and non-Muslims.
That's good. So before we start, just I want to mention that because we have a lot of other topics to touch on, I'm going to time us discussing each one of these topics, because we need to stay on point and finish each one of these topics, or else there's going to be a lot of things that we're not going to touch on. But before I go through the points that both of you mentioned that you want to bring up, there was something that we left off from the part one that you wanted to make sure that we address. But let's just give it 5 minutes and then we'll move on.
To begin with, we left off last session where I asked Brother Daniel a question regarding his belief that the problems with Islam, and I mentioned ISIS. So we're speaking about Islamic extremism, modern Islamic extremism, whether or not this was a result of foreign intervention into Muslim land, and that Western powers form policies that allow their military to intervene in the Middle East and fight Western wars in the Middle East. And I did not agree with that. I disagreed by saying that in fact the American government, the former American government, financing ISIS, financing Islamist rebels, financing Al-Qaeda, this does not really create Islamic extremism. This only revives what is already there. The ideology of ISIS existed from the very early years of Islam. And I referred to an incident that explains the beheadings of ISIS, which took place under the Caliph of Islam, the first Caliph Abu Bakr, and he is the father-in-law of our Prophet Muhammad. And Abu Bakr, clearly in Al-Bukhari, because the brother requested evidence from me, in Al-Bukhari an incident is very clear that after the death of Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr made it an obligatory act, and this is in the chapter of Zakah, made it an obligatory act for everyone to pay Zakah, to pay charity to the Caliph. And this is in Al-Bukhari, the obligatory charity tax, zakat, and this is hadith number 1399 to 1400. Now, when we take a look at, for example, Abu Bakr said, by Allah, I will fight those who differentiate between prayer and zakat. Zakat meaning the charity. Zakat is the compulsory right to be taken from the property of regular Muslims, and if they refuse to pay, even a she-kid, which they used to pay at the time of the Messenger of Allah, I will fight them for it. And then he did. He fought, for example, if you take a look at the Ridda Wars, the Wars of Apostasy. We have an entire book called the Ridda Wars I will quote the references in English. Kitab al-Ridda by al-Waqidi, 1990, printed, page 107 to 108. And then we have a huge amount of references which I can send to you and to the viewers. We can link them. And I'm keeping my eye on the time. So this incident took place. What took place was Abu Bakr wanted the Muslims to take tax. The Muslims did not wish to pay tax. Some who did not believe in his caliphate, which the Muslims believe the Prophet had appointed, who said, after me is Abu Bakr. So it's all divine. The prophecy of Muhammad was divine. The appointment of Abu Bakr, according to mainstream Islam, was divine. This divine appointed caliph, by the words of the Prophet, that the Quran says does not utter from his own self. It is only the words of Allah. This appointed caliph, and also the father-in-law of Muhammad, went and ordered Khalid ibn al-Walid to kill a man called Malik ibn Nuwayra. And they killed him. And they raped his wife in the same night. And they cooked his head. And it's all quoted. I have right here Islamic sources, evidences.
Where in Bukhari
all
does
of
it say
them.
cooked?
I did not say, I said Kitab al-Waqidi. These are major, gigantic sources in Islam. If
Where
you
does
want
it
to reject
cooked?
them, you can reject. I'll show you.
Let's just focus on what we agree on.
No.
Because
They
the
cooked the
beheading
head.
is what you were
Let's
talking
finish
about.
5 and then
My
you have
time.
5, yeah.
They cooked the head and they raped his wife. And while you're speaking, I'm going to bring them out again. These are more than just one references. This is an agreed upon. In fact, even Umar ibn al-Khattab wanted to kill him for doing that. Do you disagree that Umar wanted to do that?
He will start in 5 and when your time is
The
up.
point is, in my last 30 seconds, the point is, this is not one incident. We can ignore this. What about all the others? They killed them beheaded. You cannot separate between Islam, which is this, and what the people do. Abu Bakr and the Prophet are not just any people for you to say they don't represent Islam.
So before I start your time, can you also maybe tie this into saying whether Islam endorses violence and that's justified as well?
That's a very big
That's
topic.
You want
Let's
to
have a
get,
separate 5 minutes for
okay,
that.
so separate five
First
minutes.
of all, so I'm going to talk about this incident that you described. What I denied was not what you described from Sahih Bukhari. Okay. First of all, ISIS has been denounced by Muslims around the world. All scholars across sects, Shia, Sunni, they have all denounced ISIS. And have denounced ISIS's claim to be following Islam correctly. Only white supremacists, white nationalists, Islamophobes, and apparently Imam Tawhidi think that ISIS has some kind of normative connection with Islam. So that's point number one. Point number two, yes, Khalid ibn Walid, a great general, the greatest general in Muslim history and also in world history, did kill Malik ibn Nuwayra. And he did this for reasons that he had in this time of instability and war. And
It was not
Omar,
5 minutes.
Omar, peace be, radiallahu anh, may God be pleased with him, disputed his decision making on killing this particular figure. And so that it's possible for caliphs and the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to disagree and for them to make mistakes. There's no question about that. As for rape, I mean, this is a very inflammatory thing that you're saying. Cooking his head, this is all Shia sources
No,
who are
Sunni sources.
no, they're
Don't
not
lie.
Sunni sources.
Okay, no,
I'm
don't
not-
lie.
We have to let
Please
him-
don't
Sunni
interrupt while I'm
sources.
No, let
talking.
him finish.
Yes.
Don't interrupt. I've only spoken for a
Don't
minute and a
accuse me
half,
of
and
lying.
you're already
Yeah,
interrupted.
don't accuse me of lying.
Yeah, I am accusing
Don't
you
say
of
Shia sources.
misrepresenting.
Guys, no,
I am
we
accusing
agreed.
you
We
of
agreed we're gonna do this
misrepresenting.
format.
But don't say Shia sources because that makes me a liar.
Did I
have
interrupt
Sunni
you
sources.
and call you a liar in the
But
middle of
I
your
didn't insult
discussion?
you either. I did not insult you by saying Shia sources.
I just said it wasn't in Sunni sources. So
It is in Sunni
you're calling me a
sources.
liar by saying
It
Guys,
is in
guys,
Sunni
so don't
sources.
interrupt.
Okay, guys.
It is in
on,
Sunni
let's-
sources.
Guys, no, let
Yes,
let
move
him.
on. Don't say Shia sources. You
No,
say Shia means I'm a liar.
There's a disagreement. He's not saying you're
It
lying.
is
Let's
Sunni
fo-
source.
Let's
Okay,
focus.
You did not
let's-
establish that was in Sunni
I
sources.
did.
Let's
Al-Wadi-
let him finish.
I
You,
Let him
you
finish
read
his
the
point.
hadith
Al-
from
Baladuri.
Sahih Bukhari.
Guys, we have so
You read
many
the
things we
narration
need to
from
touch
Sahih
on.
Bukhari, and I addressed that.
Continue.
No, let's not interrupt. Okay, let's not interrupt each other. Even if the worst, even if the other side says the worst thing.
Continue.
Okay, good.
All right. So this is something that's not in Sahih sources, Sunni sources, and even the Shia sources. I have to go look. I'm not an expert in Shia Islam to be able to judge that. But it wouldn't be surprising if there were these kinds of polemics against the Sunni caliphs. But I don't disagree that Khalid ibn Walid did kill this individual, and Abu Bakr was approving of this, and Omar disagreed with this. Khalid ibn Walid did go on to marry the wife of that person that he killed, and this was seen as by Omar, and he expressed this as something that shouldn't have been done. So yeah, there can be disagreements amongst the companions of the Prophet, and this is something that's recognized and acknowledged within Sunni theology. Again, this is you mentioned the Ridda Wars. This is a time of extreme political unrest within the history of Islam, and Khalid ibn Walid made choices and decisions that he needed to make within that context, and he was supported by the first caliph, and the second caliph who succeeded Abu Bakr disagreed with his methodology, and that's fine. There's nothing that's wrong with that. We see those kinds of decisions being made in wartime scenarios within every tradition and community and culture. To point to this and say that this is the reason why we have ISIS, I mean, that's preposterous. That's all Muslims are reading these same sources. I'm not going around and killing people and beheading them for no reason. So this is just inflammatory. You're repeating the kinds of statements that we find from Islamophobes and white supremacists, which you seem to have an affiliation with. So.
Okay.
Guys, we need to move on to different topics.
No, I'm gonna stick on this because I need to prove that I'm not a liar.
Do you want to stick on this topic, or do you want to move on?
I have to.
I
prove
didn't come here to debate the details.
What
of
I suggest we do.
Sunni
I
Can
have
I make
to
a
prove
suggestion?
Shia
myself.
polemics.
I want to prove that I'm not a liar.
Okay.
Is this time over?
Okay. Well. Okay. 5-minute response, and then after this we'll
Move to
on.
any topic.
How can we move on if I can't respond to him calling me a liar?
But
Okay.
then it will be
It's-
forever.
this is- we,
No,
he
guys.
said- we can.
Okay, guys. You have to. We have
You
have
can-
other.
you can
We
put
have
the
other.
links.
We have other.
They called
topics.
me supremacist,
about
affiliated
this?
with supremacists, white supremacists,
How about this?
Islamophobe. Let me
We
respond.
can talk about that. Let's talk about white supremacy.
No,
Let's
let
talk
me
about
respond.
Islamophobia.
Let
Let's
me
talk about
respond.
colonialism.
Okay, how about
I want
this?
to talk
Why
about
don't you
that.
let me respond?
How about this? How about this?
Why won't you let me speak?
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna 5 minutes and then 5-minute response, and then we'll move away from this.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
5 minutes and then 5 minutes you respond. Then we'll move away. Different topic. Okay.
Got it.
Tariq al-Tabari, one of the, if not the most authentic Islamic source on history. Volume 10, The Conquest of Arabia, page 104. Tariq al-Tabari. Take it down on your phone and you can follow up with from Sunni sources. Giant Sunni theologian historian says Khalid ibn al-Walid used to excuse himself from killing Malik on the grounds that Malik had said when he was interrogating him, I think your companion was only saying such and such. Khalid said, and why didn't you reckon him a companion of yours? Then he made him come forward and struck off his head. Who? Khalid ibn al-Walid and those of his companions. Then when Umar ibn al-Khattab learned of their murder, he spoke of it with Abu Bakr the Caliph repeatedly, saying the enemy of God has done what? Has become an apostate. Who? Malik, against a Muslim man, killing him and then leaping upon his wife, not waiting and then ending up to marry her like you said. He cut off his head and he leaped upon his wife and he killed her. This is one part of the incident from Tariq al-Tabari. I'll bring
Where did
more
he say
sources.
killed her?
No,
He,
wait. 5
he
minutes.
raped her. Sorry, he raped her. He killed Malik and he raped his wife. وَنَزَى عَلَى إِمْرَأَتِهِ. This is what the Arabic sources say. He raped her, and even if he wanted to marry her, he has to wait 4 months and 10 days for the blood cycle. You know the Islamic ruling. Do not lie.
Let's not accuse each other of lying.
And
Maybe
this
we-
man, you just praised this man. You just praised him. the greatest general. Did he not praise him? You praise this terrorist.
Okay, so he can respond now?
Respond whatever you want to say.
Okay, respond, and then after this, we're moving to a different topic, okay?
All right. So number one, you read a translation.
It's
from the-
exact, certified,
No.
don't lie.
Okay,
certified
No, 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 no.
translation.
Let's not
You
interrupt.
are making lies.
Oh my God.
Look,
Certified from your
if I can
books.
speak, I can clarify.
Don't
what I mean
lie.
by
Do not defend terrorists.
Okay,
Tabari, okay,
let him speak
this
for
is a
let him
known
speak 5
point
minutes
of
without
this.
interruption.
I'm not disagreeing that Khalid ibn Walid killed this person.
Good.
That's not where the disagreement. I'm not disagreeing that this was a beheading. Again, I'm not disagreeing with those historical facts. To say that he raped him, that's a point of Shia Sunni divergence and disagreement.
It's not
Because-
Shia Sunni.
No,
It's not Shia Sunni.
let him finish.
He's fooling you.
Let him.
It's not Shia Sunni. They're Sunni between themselves, killing each other.
Let him finish. This is his time now.
Finish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can talk about this in a very calm way. We don't need to get upset.
Of
this
course,
is
you-
something
you're
I-
praising a
Let him
terrorist.
finish. Let him finish. Let him finish. Let him finish.
Yeah, I mean Khalid ibn Walid. I named one of my sons after Khalid.
Yeah,
ibn Walid.
good luck to your son. He should
So
sue
anyway,
you.
this is something that is a point of disagreement between Shias and Sunnis. In their polemics, Shia accuse Khalid ibn Walid of just not going through the waiting period before marrying his wife. Sunnis maintain that no, he waited through the waiting period
No, they did not.
before
Let him finish, let him
marrying.
finish.
So it wasn't a rape.
It was a rape. He
It
leaped
was-
on his wife. You say he
Please.
leaped.
Yeah,
Tariq
so
Tabari.
this is just Shia
Oh,
polemics.
please.
Oh, Tabari is Shia.
Come on.
Tariq Tabari.
Tabari sorts
Please,
sites from many different sources. It doesn't mean that's authentic.
It's not
or that it's
certified by the
verified.
Sunni.
If you want to find narrations in
Okay,
Tabari,
guys,
yes,
we need
Tabari
to- we need to have
is
some
a
sort-
Sunni Muslim, but
All
he
right.
cites from many different sources
All right, this-
without that necessarily being
We're
authentic.
ending this.
It's
We're
a point
ending
of
this.
disagreement.
We're ending this topic. We're moving to the next one. We're moving to the next
So
one.
how is
Lie
that,
through
how
your
is that-
teeth.
how
We're
is that
moving-
fair that he gets to speak for
No, he
5
spoke for
minutes
2 minutes.
uninterrupted?
You
Lie
talked
through
for
your
two-
I didn't
teeth.
interrupt
Oh,
his 2
are you
minutes.
finished? Are you not? Okay,
You
two more
liar.
minutes.
Yes.
Tabari take from Shia sources.
Emma,
Yeah.
Get out of here.
let him.
Baba, start a new topic. He named his son after a terrorist. Start
Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, this is many Muslims name their children Khalid.
Yeah.
This is a very common name, and
It's
he's a respected
He's a terrorist.
Can I?
and
He's a
very
terrorist.
strong
Beheaded the
Muslim
guy.
leader, and he's recognized within Western history as well
No,
as being
he's
the
not.
most successful general
He's not successful. He's a
within
successful terrorist.
No, dear,
Muslim
you have to
history.
let him finish the time.
But he's lying at you.
yeah, but
He's lying to you.
This
I'm
is the way,
disappointed
this is
in
the
you.
way that someone
You're
will.
not even outraged. You're not outraged. He's telling you
This is how
guy, he's praising a guy who's a terrorist who butchered people.
the way we can understand other people, even if we don't agree with them, is by listening to them. We can't just yell at them and get them.
I'm not yelling. Well, I am yelling. I'm frustrated, but I'm not angry. I'm frustrated that he would justify. How can you justify? I don't understand. Don't give me your Harvard. You can never intellectually justify the fact that someone doesn't want to give you money. You go and you behead them and you take their wife, whether it be a waiting period of 10 years or 10 days. You can never justify that.
You are putting such a
Accusation.
polemical frame of it.
Oh,
that,
it's all wrong.
he wouldn't
Oh,
give
no,
Khalid ibn Walid personal money. No. He was.
Alright.
This was something that was to
Next
maintain the
angels.
cohesion and
One-
the
one
unity
thing- one
of
thing-
the
one thing-
They're all
new
angels.
Muslim state.
and they're
And
good
so
Guys,
they made
people.
guys,
decisions
cut it
that
out,
was
cut it out.
needed.
Okay, cut it out. Then one thing we can do at the end is that if you have any written statement in response to this that you want to add, I'll put it in the description of this video. Okay?
No need.
Okay. I'm gonna ask a question. Can Islam be reformed? Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first?
Let him go first, since he's the reformist.
Islam will never be reformed,
All right.
to begin with.
Okay.
Islam will never ever be reformed because I simply believe that reformation of a religion is man-made, and Muslims, whether it be because of their culture or whether it be because of the traditional teachings or the atmosphere that they've grown up in, we have a united understanding that we can never accept what is not from God. So religion has to be from God. Religion can never be man-made and at the same time be accepted by the Muslims. So a reformation is basically introducing something that is man-made and trying to present it as though it's a religion or a belief system that exists, whereby it doesn't. So what do I believe in? I believe that Muslim individuals can liberate themselves from terrorist teachings and extremist fundamentalist ideologies, such as praising terrorists, such as this, and naming their children after terrorists.
Okay, let's not go back to that.
No, I'm not going back. But this is a good way to move forward. So this is how a Muslim can basically liberate his mind and liberate his family from corrupt teachings, which basically say you can name your son after a terrorist or name your daughter after a terrorist. It doesn't work like this. There are terrorist females in Islamic history. So this is my stance on Islamic Reformation. The current reform movements that we see today are all a scam. They present a form of Islam that does not exist. There is no Islam that agrees 100% with the Constitution. There is no such teaching that came from Mecca that sits 100% with the laws of New York or the laws of America. Whether the American laws are 100% perfect or not, that's a different discussion. But we are speaking about an ideology and the current society that we have today. Is it compatible? It's not. Can there be a reformation? There can never be a reformation. Islam is not a religion that can be reformed. This is something we need to understand. Very simple. Why? One of the main factors why Islam cannot be reformed is because, one, its reformation would be man-made. Secondly, there is no actual governing Islamic body that tells it where to go. So if the church wanted to go through a period of reformation or enlightenment, they would have to take orders from a superior religious hierarchy that directs them towards that direction. Islam doesn't have that. Islam has two major denominations and then over 70 schools of thought from within that. Each one of them does not see the other Muslim as a true Muslim. To begin with, this Muslim is not a real Muslim according to that Muslim. And according to most Muslims, the Ahmadiyya Muslims are not Muslims. So there will never be a reformation because there's no unity when it comes to understanding the religion and the needs of the religion and so on and so forth. Another matter which is very, very important is the funding of these reform movements. It's impossible for a Muslim community to say, yes, you know what, we are fundamentalists, let us become open-minded and try to understand the other side. But who's funding the other side? Some Zionist businessman or a Republican donor. This will never work. A reformist movement needs to be completely independent, whereby Muslims can find some connection with the other people. Now, what do I believe in? I go around promoting the idea that every violent ruling within Islam, such as beheading, such as stoning, does not exist in this current time. Did our ancestors do it? Yes, and they were terrorists. So what if they did it? Because my ancestor did it, it doesn't mean it's right. Because the companions of Prophet Muhammad did it, does not mean it's right. We have to turn around and condemn our bloody history, blood-dripping history, and wake up and move forward. This capital punishment doesn't suit in this atmosphere. It doesn't suit in today's era. It never suited any era, but that was the language of the time. Now we can develop, and we have developed. It's only the extremists that doesn't want to develop. It's only them that want to continue to butcher and kill people. So this is my belief system, that there will never be a reformation, but Muslims can find an ideology that they can still be Muslims, but reject terrorist figures and terrorist teachings from the history of Islam. Thank you.
Okay, so he's going to talk now, but let him speak throughout his 5 minutes. If you want to be able to respond to what he said, let him speak. Like next question, maybe he could do it first. Okay.
Yeah, so I think that what to say to that is interesting how...
But before you respond to that, can Islam be reformed? You need to answer the question as well at first.
Can Islam be reformed? I mean, this is something that has already taken place. So, I mean, the question is this reform correct? Mm-hmm. Is it correct from an Islamic point of view? Is it morally correct? What kind of political implications are there? I mean, those are the real questions. There's already been many attempts to reform Islam. And as a traditional Muslim, Orthodox Muslim, I don't consider those efforts legitimate. I think that what Tawhidi said, that Imam Tawhidi said about reformism is a scam, I completely agree with that, which I find strange because he introduced himself as a reformist. So I don't know if he's calling himself a scam artist or not.
Oh, let's not
But, I mean, this is- I'm
let's
just
not
looking-
throw subtle accusations at each other. Okay, like
I'm
like,
just repeating the words that
No,
he
but
mentioned. He's calling me a terrorist or a supporter of terrorism because I
let's
named my son
everybody. Let's stop
after
doing that.
Khalid ibn Walid.
Everybody,
so this is something that...
yes, both sides.
I
Stop
think,
doing that. Stop throwing.
Okay, well, let me finish my 5 minutes.
Go.
You keep interrupting.
Sorry, I'll give you more time. 5 minutes, 10 seconds. Go on. Sorry.
All right, so when we look at the history of Islamic reform, we have to go back to the beginning of the colonial period, at the beginning of the 19th century. We have to look at what was the motivation to want to reform Islam. And what we find are colonizers with colonizing agents such as Lord Cromer within Egypt. We find the British in the Asian subcontinent, in India. We find them in Malaysia and Indonesia. And they all had the same goal as colonizers. We need to get Muslims less committed to Islamic law. Because if they're committed to Islamic law, they're not going to accept us as their rulers. They're not going to accept our law. They're not going to accept our companies and corporations, such as the East India Company, that's wanting to control them and take their resources and enslave them. And they're going to fight against us. They're going to engage in jihad, in defending their land and their families and their people against our imperial invasion. So we have to convince them that what we are doing as colonizers is helping them progress. So they need to understand that Islam is something that is open to reformation. It's open to becoming secularized and liberalized. And so they took deliberate measures to influence Muslims and to, in the words of Lord Cromer, de-Muslimize Muslims. And they did this, for example, by bringing some of the top intellectuals of the Muslim world, top scholars of the Muslim world, to England, to France, giving them a secular education, secularizing them, getting them acculturated to European, Western culture, and then sending them back into top positions at universities, at Islamic universities, had them establish their own universities, such Sayyid Ahmad Khan, for example, established his university within the subcontinent, and taking control of governmental positions, media positions, to tell Muslims not that we are here to destroy Islam. No, we're here just to bring a more enlightened Islam, to bring an Islam that is more peaceful, more tolerant. We're here just to help Muslims achieve the kind of progress that Europe has enjoyed. And so this is the history of reformism. It is something that is government funded. It is something that is pushed because to this day, through the work of different NGOs around the Muslim world. And the goal has always been the same, to have Muslims denounce or separate themselves from those aspects of their religion that conflicts with the colonial enterprise, with the influence of imperial law, to have them abandon those aspects of their religion that conflicts with liberal secularism, feminism, and so forth. So this is a deliberate program. It has been very successful, unfortunately, and we find different kind of native informants around the world who are sponsored by Western governments to present themselves. Look, I'm a Muslim. In fact, I'm a scholar. In fact, I'm an Imam. And Muslims, we have a problem. Islam is a tragedy. We have to change Islam and make it more compatible with the modern progressive way of life. And we have to denounce our past, and we have to burn and slash our tradition, because these are all terrorists. And we have to embrace the path of enlightenment, the path of progress that our Western masters are presenting. So this is something that we find in the past, we find it today, sometimes we find it in amongst ourselves.
I really want to move to the next topic, but may I move to the next topic? Wait, before I start, may I move, or if you respond, then he would have to give him, that would be another 10 minutes. Do you want to?
Of course I have to respond.
Okay. But then, so let's have a plan then. You're gonna respond, and then he's gonna respond, and then we'll move.
I don't mind.
Okay.
I don't mind.
But then,
firstly,
okay.
Firstly, with regards to the brother calling or implying that whether or not I am a scam artist because I called the reform movement a scam. Yes, I refer to myself as a reformist, but I mean, I'm surprised that you don't know that reforming Islam has many meanings, and it's applied to many people with different agendas throughout the history of religions, and especially Islam, which in this case we're talking about. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph of ISIS, considers himself a reformer. The founder of Wahhabism considered himself a reformer. In fact, Prophet Muhammad considered himself a reformer when he came to to Mecca with his message, and Islam emerged as a reformist religion that told the men to stop burying their newborn daughters. So for me to call myself a reformist, it does not mean that I'm a prophet, and it does not mean that I'm like Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. Neither does it mean that I'm part of any other reform movement. It's up to you, before pointing fingers, to understand what type of a reformist is this man. Is he someone that wants to revive what had existed before Islam, the delusion that the Meccan Islam was somewhat more peaceful than the Medina Islam? What exactly does he want? Or is he a reformist that deals on matters that concern today's way of life, which is exactly what I do. I couldn't care less about what happened in Mecca. I denounce it and I move on. Now, moving on to what he said about the Lord that he mentioned, and the people who come to colonize Muslim worlds and bring these influential Muslims and take them to the West, and then bring them back and try to convince the people that live in the Muslim world that through universities and centers that we are here to bring you a more enlightened version of Islam. We are here to help you. We don't want to eradicate Islam. And then he referred to other issues previously of Islamophobia. Firstly, there is no Islamophobia, and nobody is trying to destroy Islam. In fact, let me rephrase, nobody has destroyed Islam more than Muslims themselves. A day doesn't go by without Muslims killing themselves, murdering each other, butchering each other, issuing fatwas against each other. Muslims kill more Muslims than anybody has touched Muslims in history. Now, you always speak from the mentality that we are being oppressed, and look at what the West is doing to us, and someone take a look at the evil doings of yes, the West has evil people. The Westerners will tell you that we are ashamed of our history. They will tell you that we killed and we butchered. No problem. They will tell you. Nobody's denying that. You somehow crafted in a way as though the Muslims were all angels, as though we were all angels. Brother, are you Iranian, if I may ask? You are Iranian. Your nation,
I was born in the US, but
yes,
my parents are from Iran.
Your heritage, you're Iranian. Your nation was converted into Islam by the sword. I'm not Iranian. I come from an Arabian lineage of the companions of Prophet Muhammad, Adi ibn Hatim al-Ta'i. He is my ancestor. Probably my ancestor came and took over your country. So why do you support terrorists that took over your heritage? And you find me, of course I'm going to condemn my terrorists. So what's wrong with me condemning dark history? What's wrong with that? So this is a question. Do not make it seem as though Muslims did nothing. They were all cool. How did these Malaysia, Indonesia, they all became Muslim by the sword. All of them became Muslim. All Islamic caliphates. All of the conquering, over 53 countries, all of the terrorist Islamic caliphates conquered and butchered. You're going to say conquests, or someone else might say conquest. It's not conquest. In the science of politics, it's invasion. You go and you rape and you kill and you take their riches, and then you go back because they're Jews or because they're Christians, and then you want to somehow justify this through the laws of war. It doesn't happen like that. Another issue is that these people are making their Islam, making Muslims less committed to Islam. There are more Muslims leaving Islam today than any other religion, and the brother in Atheist Republic can prove that to you. What ISIS has done will have more Muslims leave Islam than any foreign agenda can do. And if you want to say, oh, ISIS doesn't represent Islam, ISIS represents the exact Islam that took place in Mecca, and we have names of people that were victims of that ideology. Thank you.
Okay, so if I'm going to give you 5 minutes, but if you don't want me to interrupt you, both of you, don't make any subtle accusations, and that way there will be no interruptions, okay?
What's wrong with that? He can accuse me of anything he wants.
No, both of you from now, I think, don't accuse each other of lying, scam artists, being terrorists.
I think it's important to recognize the role that people play in current politics. I think that's a very
Well, you can't be
much a part-
sure, so don't accuse.
Yeah, I'm not accusing. I'm just making
So-
very general statements.
Yeah. If
Brother Armin,
hint, okay.
let him say what he wants.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think
You
he
say
can.
what
He has
I
a
want?
thick skin. I mean, he's heard it all. He's on Twitter. He knows
Okay.
what
Fine.
what
5
the
minutes.
deal is. If I say something, it's not gonna
I
bother
only
him.
get offended when you praise terrorists. This I
No,
have to
this is getting started to. Okay, no. 5 minutes, no. Okay.
I mean, there's like a lot of things to discuss that he's raised. He mentions going back to what existed before. We have to go back to what existed before. My question is, okay, well, how do you know what has existed before? Do you rely on texts? Do you rely on traditions? Do you rely on narrations that have been passed down through an oral tradition? Do you rely, because he's constantly denouncing all of the books of Sunnis. He's constantly denouncing the traditions of even the Shia. So what's left? What kind of knowledge do you have about what happened before when you've completely cut yourself off by saying that these people are all terrorists? So I think this is a contradiction in epistemology here. On the contention that Islam spread by the sword, I'm not going to try to deny that the influence of Islam was definitely spread through military conquest. And I mentioned Khalid ibn Walid and how he was one of the greatest generals, the greatest general within Islamic history. But there's this kind of understanding that violence is something that we have to denounce, and that we have to view religion as something that is violent in its essence, and this violence is what makes religion so dangerous. And I think that you as an atheist would agree with that kind of reasoning, but I don't think it's self-evident that violence in and of itself is something that we reject as a society. Absolutely not. Order in society, the structure of governance of the nation state, any government that has existed in pre-modernity or modernity is on the basis of violence, is on the basis of law enforcement. How can you enforce? How can you coerce without violence? Police officers that are walking and patrolling the streets are authorized to use violence, to use force. Why? Because this is how you can maintain order and how you can maintain a legal regime. So we don't have a problem with violence. The problem is not with violence. The problem is what is being pushed and what is being enforced through violence. So we can have a debate on whether Islam is true or not. If you think that Islam is true, and you think that Islam is a true religion and it is from God, then you do want to spread this. You want this to reach all corners of the globe, in the same way that a liberal person would think that racism and anti-racism is something that must be defended through force, or sexism is something that has to be eradicated. Misogyny is something that has to be eradicated. Anti-Semitism is something that has to be eradicated by force. Why? Because we have a legal regime that makes it that has high penalties for people who are racists, people who are misogynists, people who are violating these kinds of liberal norms. And people don't have any problem with that kind of enforcement. If I tell Armin, or I tell you that, oh, do you know that such and such society is mistreating its women and is misogynistic and abusing its women, shouldn't we do something about that? Shouldn't we go and change that society by force? Obviously, they're not going to agree. That society is not going to agree and say, oh yeah, sure, just come into our country and reform and make us give up our misogynistic ways. No, you have to do that by force. But you think that that's justified because this is something that you agree as a good. You agree that this is something, and I agree too, that misogyny should be something that should be eradicated. Racism is something that should be eradicated. We should not have a tolerance for racist, white supremacist, anti-Semitic kind of hatred. No, there's no place for this. And if you believe in that and you agree with me, then you'll also agree that there should be force and laws that penalize those and hold people accountable and take away their livelihood or imprison them physically, imprison them. That's a form of violence for violating those kinds of norms. So Islam is the truth. Islam is the truth. And so as a Muslim, of course, I think that it should spread, and that kind of law and legal regime should spread. Does that mean that in Islamic history, they went to people with a sword and said, convert, otherwise we'll kill you?
Yes.
No, that didn't happen, because the scholars have explicitly said that that is not permissible. But as far as spreading Islam through military conquest, yeah, that's an undeniable part of Muslim history. And that's something that is justifiable in any kind of argument that we want to present.
I really need to move on to the next topic, okay? And this is going to be a question mostly addressed to Imam. There's no response need to this, but then I'm going to ask a question that is mostly directly to you, okay? So, and I'm going to, because it seems like we're not going to get to a lot of the topic, I'm going to combine a few questions together, okay? So, you mentioned that the Quran is perfect, right? It seems like you have a lot of
Wait, I did not say the Quran.
Okay,
was
so
perfect.
my question is, I'll ask a question.
Be
Okay,
careful.
so
I did not say the Quran was perfect.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. Is the Quran perfect? What does Islam have to offer? What's good about Islam? Because I hear a lot of negative things about Islam that you mentioned. I want to see what's good about Islam that you mentioned. And it seems, and also, is it true that most of your critique for Islam focuses on the Sunni sources of Islam, and whenever you're asked to talk about your critiques for the Shia parts of Islam, you mention Khomeini or anything that has to do with Vilayat Faqih, but are you endorsing Shiism, not the Vilayat Faqih version of Shiism, but other forms of Shiism, but just your main target is Sunni Islam? Is that the case? And also, what is the Islam that you agree with, and why is it good, and why are you a Muslim? Sorry, I know that was a lot of questions, but if I don't ask them all together, then I don't think we're going to get to any.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first question, very simple. Is the Quran perfect? The answer is clearly no, simply because, according to the Sunni teachings, a goat and a sheep came and ate parts of it. So it can't be perfect, in the sense it could be good enough, but it's not perfect, according to my understanding. This is how I see the world. If a book had verses in it and a goat came and ate from it, it cannot be perfect anymore. And according to the Shia belief, there are many things concerning the family of Prophet Muhammad that are not included in the Quran. There are rights of people that have been taken from the Quran. So both Muslim schools of thought, both denominations, don't have evidence that the Quran is in fact the way it is perfect 100%. It is not. There are verses in the Quran that Shias believe are supposed to be in a different place, such as parts in chapter 5, and there are also parts in chapter 33, especially verse 33. Many people believe that these verses of purification should be somewhere else in order to give a different context. The point is, the Quran, how it is, people can say all Muslim scholars agree. They don't all agree. There are many books written about tahrif al-Quran, the distortion of the Quran, and it's been proven throughout history that the Quran, one time a sheep eats it or a goat, and all this. So to me, no, I don't believe so. Secondly, when it comes to why I'm still a Muslim, you see, I've answered this before in one of my interviews. I do not believe, and this is how I see life, I do not believe that religion is something you can leave and is something you can no longer be part of. Yes, a certain part of ideas might no longer seem convincing to you, and you believe in another set of ideas. But I believe religion is actually part of the heritage of the human being. You can never run away. I can never run away from the fact that I come from a lineage that played a big role in the establishment of Islam. No matter to what religion I convert to, whether I leave it or not, I can never run away from that. It's part of who I am. It's part of me. It's part of my thinking. It's part of my being. I don't see religion as though it's something that is on the side. No, it's a way of life, and that's how it was produced to me. That's how I developed as a human being. Therefore, I don't see it that way, and I cannot change the laws that I believe in. Are there figures in Islam that I completely adore and I love and I care about? Yes, there are figures such as Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, who was butchered and massacred by the Muslims themselves, the caliphs themselves. I love his offspring. I love many Sunni scholars in modern times, such as Hassan Farhan al-Maliki. I adore good Muslims that wish to, make the world a better place. Your question: what can Muslims offer?
Islam. What can Islam?
So what can Islam offer? Islam can offer whatever other religions offered. What can other religions offer? Islam can also offer that. Islam is no different from Christianity or Judaism when it comes to offering. It can give its adherents security. It can form governments. It can do whatever other governments do. Whether or not these offerings are required is a different story. But Islam's offering is completely different from what Muslims can offer. And I believe what Muslims can offer is a great deal, from art and music, everything. Take a look at our countries, Iran, Dubai, become developed in 20, 25 years. Why? Because the door has been opened. Muslims can offer many things. The only thing is, the Muslims are better than their ideology of fundamental Islamism. They are better than their ideology. If only we lift the chains of this corrupt teachings of theocracy.
Islamic doctrine. What's something positive about the Islamic doctrine?
When it comes to doctrine, it's not a matter of positive or negative. It's an idea that could be right and could be wrong.
Okay, last question I had, which you haven't answered. Is it true that you mostly focus on criticizing Sunni Islam, and when you're asked to criticize Shia Islam, you mostly only focus on Velayat Fatih?
I criticize Islam in the sense that I criticize extremist Islamism, militant Islamism, fundamentalist teachings of Islam that lead to beheading, stoning, killing, and so on and so forth. I have no problem with the moderate Muslim and the peaceful Muslim who wishes to live his life peacefully. Now, I'll take a few more seconds because you interrupted me. I oppose all theocracies. I do not believe in a Shia Muslim government or a Sunni Muslim government. I am a reformist, and sects are not relevant to me. I look at Islam as a religion as a whole. Another issue is I do not identify in being part of any sect. I was born a Muslim, and this is the tragedy that we are living, and I'm trying to do my best to fix it. Another issue is, in my book, The Tragedy of Islam, I have included a complete chapter dedicated to the difficulties of Shia Islam, which is the denomination that I come from. This is basically it. I do not support sectarian teachings at all, and I think they are irrelevant to my mission.
Thank you. So 5 minutes and 40 seconds. So wait, before I start the time, we wanted to make sure you talk about how Islam, you see it as a cure, you see it as superior to modern values. Islam comes with violence, it comes with wife beating, it comes with slavery, it comes with child brides. And I know each one of these are their own separate topic, but maybe you want to pick one of them and see how could you justify an ideology that endorses such teachings.
Okay, so I can address all of those that you mentioned, but in 5 minutes, I mean, that's a really big challenge.
Which one of them? Maybe.
So yeah, I'll choose one. I already addressed violence. I think that's something that, unless you're a pure pacifist, it's hard to think how you can live in a modern society.
Let's go with slavery, because you already addressed violence, I guess.
Yeah, or I can address child brides, or any of those. But I think that we have to understand that we are part of a very particular social, political context and structure that prevents us from understanding the practices not only of Muslims, but of all pre-modern societies and social structures. So this is something that is not just an issue, like if you want to talk about child marriage, if you want to talk about slavery, if you want to talk about violence, is not something that is only affecting Muslims. In fact, this is an issue, or these are points of critique by the modern West for not just Muslims, but also Native Americans, First Nations, Aboriginals, traditional Chinese, traditional Hindus, traditional Africans. And it's been used, this kind of accusation of barbarism, to justify the invasion and imperialism and the attacks on all of these communities. And so we have to really understand the larger discourse and how this kind of language of saying, oh, Islam is barbaric, has been used for all of these communities that have been genocided. Okay, and so we have to be cognizant of how this discourse plays into the current political actions that are taking place in the Muslim world and the threats from the West to invade and attack and kill and genocide Muslims throughout the world. So that's really the first point. I think that what Islam can offer as a solution, is my interlocutor said that what Islam can offer is like music and the arts. I think what Islam offers is the truth. Islam is the truth. It is the religion that has been revealed by God for the guidance of humanity. And that's something that we should discuss. These are the kinds of topics that should be discussed in media in calm, rational, measured ways. And I'm willing to discuss my reasoning for why Islam is the truth and reasons and justifications and arguments for that claim. And that's something that I encourage others to investigate as well. And when we come to those parts of Islam that conflict with the modern world, we have to take a more academic perspective and we have to understand, well, what are these practices in context of a kinship-based society? Prior to the nation state, what happened is that the nation state structure within the beginnings of the 18th century and throughout the next 300 years was a structure that was characterized by bureaucracy, by technocratic industrialization, and by the enforcement of law through a very strong police state, surveillance state. And what the effect of all of this was to destroy kinship-based systems of life and living. And so what do I mean by this? In societies in the past, kinship structure meant that every aspect of life flowed through the structure of the family, the extended family businesses. You didn't have corporations. You didn't have a global national banking system. All of these kinds of economic activity, social activity, even governmental activity, education, childcare, elderly care, all happened in context of the extended family. What the state did was destroy all these kinds of relationships and institutionalize them.
You're not really responding to the question.
No, I am responding because I have to get to that point.
Wait, you're running into time. Wait, go on. 5.
Okay, so if we understand that everything that the modern world has a problem with in terms of Islam, it also has a problem with all kinship-based societies. Let me address, for example, child marriage. Okay, the idea of childhood is actually a modern concept. It's something that if you look at the anthropology of childhood, anthropologists will note that the idea of childhood is something that's very new, only less than 200 years old. And the idea is that when you have a kinship-based society and you have a certain lifespan, then children are expected to be contributing to the family. They're expected to contribute to society and to their community because there's not a career that they're pursuing. There's not a need for a technical education that extends for 12, 14, 16 years.
I pause a little. Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
So you think that having sex with a 9-year-old is justified?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that so here, let me ask you a question. Okay, is the problem with
I'm asking you a question.
I have to frame it. Okay, so do you have a problem with child marriage because you think it is categorically wrong, or is it because it's conditionally wrong?
Well, I'm asking you the question.
I want to understand what your understanding is, because I think that the Prophet, peace be upon him, his marriage to Aisha was at 9 years of age.
21.
So do you think that I don't think that that's wrong. I can explain it and justify it, and I'm trying to give you the entire anthropological explanation and the historical explanation of that. But like I said, it can't be done in 5 minutes. I want to simplify it and say, do you think that this is categorically wrong, or is it conditionally wrong?
Categorically wrong.
If you think that it's categorically wrong to have those kinds of relationships, do you think that other kinds of sexual behavior can be categorically wrong?
as long as it harms somebody, as long as it
No,
doesn't
if you mention
consent-
harm, then it's
harm
not
and
categorical. It's conditional based on
No,
harm.
yeah, but the category that you're introducing is a category that will be harmful in all situations in that category. That's why it would be.
How can you if you specify
But that would be a-
conditions, then it's conditional. It's
Okay.
not categorical.
Okay, so let's move on to the next one.
You didn't really answer the question.
Yeah, because I wasn't. Because you want me to bring up like why you want me to explain why it's okay, why it's not okay to have sex with a 9-year-old. Like
In a particular social context, in a particular historical milieu.
I mean, to me that is
yes, it can be something that is moral and is acceptable. I can agree with you and say that within this particular context, if you take a 9-year-old who is still watching, Dora the Explorer, and it has, that kind of cultural background in the situation they were. That's wrong. That's morally wrong. But you're asking me about a completely different social circumstance in
that's not
society.
true. That's not true because
and child marriage, as you describe it, I think
Aisha
that
was
the word child is anachronistic.
If you're talking
if
about
you want
child
to talk about that, that's something that was practiced throughout history,
Yeah, no,
across
all of
all
them.
religions, across all cultures.
And I
So the
condemn-
problem that you have is not with Islam, it's not with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it's a problem with all of the past.
I condemn
You condemn all of the past.
all
That's the problem with
child
modernity.
rape. I condemn them all. And if you're thinking about the child mentality being different in different situations, remember that according to the Hadith, Aisha was playing with dolls right before Muhammad raped them.
You have 35-year-olds who play with dolls in this day and age. They're Star Wars fans, Star Trek fans. They have action figures. They play with them. That's
So
not an
you can rape
indication.
them.
It's not rape. Okay,
Oh.
you just
Okay,
throw around the
let's-
word rape whenever you want to, or terrorism, willy nilly. I don't take that as serious academic analysis.
If you want, we could dedicate another 5 minutes just to that. If you want after this, but I have other questions for you as well. But let me reset this. You mentioned that this is something we need to talk about. What the Muslim world need? What does the Muslim world need right now?
The Muslim world needs to realize that now we have extremists who are graduating from Harvard.
No, let's not do that.
Right?
Let's not do that.
Before they used to
Please.
dress in long, basic Islamic tradition like this, and you can identify that this is a guy who holds a certain ideology, but when he speaks, you can then understand where he's coming from. Now they're dressed in suits and ties, and they come to university and try to academically justify that marrying a 9-year-old, although I don't believe it happened, because in my book I prove she was not 9. Although I look, we may disagree. I believe there was an even greater tragedy that the Muslim world is trying to hide, and the fact that she was not a virgin and she was an obscene woman. But we're not discussing her, Aisha. We're not discussing her. We're discussing the fact that you believe that it's okay to marry a 9-year-old because society is different. Society can develop and change as many times as it like. Marrying a 9-year-old will never be right. Don't give me this lunar year, whatever nonsense they come up with. Muhammad did not marry a 9-year-old. This is a lie. Yes, other 9-year-olds from Muhammad's family were married off. Yes, I agree. Other children were married off to companions. I agree. Muhammad himself did not marry a 9-year-old. This is a lie to hide a bigger secret. And the fact that you try to purify Muhammad's image by pushing the age of his wife back to 6 or 9 or 15. You can't even agree on what age, because she wasn't a child. She was old, and she'd slept with half of Mecca before him. And people can disagree, but this is my analysis and my proven research that I challenge anyone to refute. It's in my book. And I'm happy to pull out her timeline now and prove to you that she would have been 9 years old. And also the timeline is in the book that I just released.
Not according to Sunni Islam, though.
No, not according to Sunni Islam.
I mean, according to Sunni Islam, she was 9 when she.
No, not all Sunnis. Not all Sunnis
It's in
believe.
Bukhari. It's right
yes,
in there.
Bukhari is not the only Sunni scholar.
That's a Sahih. That's
yeah, there are many other Sahihs.
He based his justification on the Quran not being perfect on Sahih Bukhari because a goat ate a page that the Quran was written on. So how is that consistent?
This
You're
was
saying that.
So you guys
take
want
the
to talk about
Sunnis-
Aisha
you
because I
take
asked
the-
a different question.
No, wait, don't go back. I'm speaking to you based on your belief system. This is sacred to you, and the Quran is sacred to you.
No, Sahih Bukhari is not sacred.
It's not sacred anymore.
That text is just a compilation of narrations. They exist in many different texts.
Okay, so do you emulate these because they're holy doings?
The Quran and the Sunnah.
Okay,
the
so
Sunnah
this is
can
a
be
Sunnah.
compiled in different
In
books.
PDF, in
Yeah,
book,
so of
yes.
course it's Sahih. Of course
You see
I
that?
study.
I'm
and this
speaking
is-
about content. He's talking about paper and cardboard. I'm telling him Bukhari. He says it can be compiled in different formats.
All right, but this is.
No, they're different. There's not just Sahih
Okay,
Bukhari.
okay.
There's Sahih
Okay.
Muslim.
She was
there's
9
Sahih-
according to
there's-
most
okay.
Islamic school of
Okay.
thought.
Yes, according to the majority of Muslims, she was 9. Yes.
And accepted Islamic schools of thought,
Yes.
she was 9.
Yeah,
When she
to,
was.
to the majority. Yes, to the majority, but not to all. Now, moving on with my time, it is absolutely wrong whatsoever. I don't care what people say. He can give it an academic coating, all what he likes. Completely wrong. It can never be justified. No way can it be justified that marrying a 9-year-old is right. And these laws that you have in certain American states that allow a man to marry a child without her parents' consent, or 11 or 10 or 12, I don't know, there are numerous states. That's also wrong. That is also wrong.
You also disagree with
yes, I do.
11-year-olds going on having girlfriend, boyfriend, 10-year-olds,
What about it?
9-year-olds
Let's not do what
having,
about it.
having sex at the age of 9 with their
Yes.
boyfriend. You agree with that?
I reject it. I don't allow
You don't
that.
think elementary school children should have boyfriend, girlfriend,
No, I don't.
and have sex with each other?
No.
Because that's rampant in Australia, the US, the UK.
I condemn it. Because it's in Australia doesn't mean I agree with it.
Okay, so you condemn. So what's the line? When is it okay
Do you
for
know?
people to
do
start
you know-
having sex?
Do you know who,
What age is
I'll
it
tell you
okay?
now. But do you know who brings these children, boyfriend, girlfriend, my body, your body things into our educational system and sex ed? Do you know who? Your allies, the allies of the Islamic extremists, the leftists, the globalists. They are the ones.
I'm not
who
aligned with
you.
leftists.
No, they are aligned with you. They would love you. They would
No,
be
they
sitting
denounce
here-
me
No,
every day.
no, no.
Yeah.
They would love
They denounce
you.
me and call me all, the same kind of things that you call me.
No.
All right,
Leftists don't like
my
what I have to
question was
say about these
completely
things.
ignored. Though, what does the
What was the
Muslim
question?
world? What does the Muslim world need right now?
I said the Muslim world right now needs to be
Okay.
warned from people like him.
Okay.
Yeah, the
That's
Muslim
what
world,
it means.
according to some, needs the white savior to
right,
come
let's give you
and
five-
colonize and enlighten the Muslims and teach the Muslims. The
Okay,
Muslim
this is your
world-
5 minutes. What
Okay.
does the world? What does the Muslim world need right now?
The Muslim world needs for the West to leave it alone. That's what the Muslim world needs. The Muslim world needs for the cessation of this kind of intervention and war and sanctions and intervention that has been taking place for over 200 years. That's what the Muslim world needs. The Muslim world needs to reject agents of Western powers
Can
who
you prove
are
it?
going to
Can you prove I'm an agent?
maybe one day Allah
Academic?
will
Can
prove
you?
it.
Maybe one day, yeah. Can you
Just
prove
keep
it?
hiding your books. Let's
No.
just continue the question.
Can you prove it?
See, you just
Prove
did that
what?
again.
Can you prove I'm an agent?
No, I'm not claiming that I can prove it.
Then
I'm
why
saying-
do you say it?
Based on the kinds of things that you promote, and
Like
the kinds
what?
of things you say, that Islam is a tragedy, that all Islam can offer the world is
Did I
music
say
and
Islam
art,
was a tragedy? Did I say Islam was a
that
tragedy?
the Quran is not perfect, that there's
wait, Armin, wait. Did I say Islam was a tragedy?
It's the title of your book.
The tragedy of Islam, it means Islam has a tragedy. And it's
Islam
you people.
has a tragedy.
And it's you people.
Yeah, so you could have said that the tragedy with Muslims today.
No, not necessarily. You need to ask me what does the title of your book mean, and I would explain that the
I'm
tragedy
not
of
really
Islam
interested.
is people like you. Now, can you prove I'm an agent?
No, I'm not going to say that. I
No,
can
you're
prove
not
it.
exactly. So don't say it.
I didn't say it. Did I say
No,
Imam Tawhidi
no,
is an agent?
look at him.
No, I
like
did not
a
say
coward
that.
now, cowering.
No.
You said agents like, and now you say I'm not saying you're an agent.
You know? Yeah, I didn't say that you are an agent, but
All right, go with your 5 minutes.
Look, this
There
is
are
this is his
agents
type of
of-
people.
you did.
when they
this
are
is what you did. You
when-
pointed at him when
Yeah.
you said the word agent.
yeah,
They
he's calling me a
can't.
terrorist, dude.
Of course,
He's calling me a terrorist.
I never called you a
What
terrorist.
can be? Look at where we
I
are.
did not call you a
Accusing
terrorist.
someone of being a terrorist
I didn't call you a
can have
terrorist.
extreme ramifications for me and my family.
I never called you a terrorist.
We're living
we
in,
have the
uh,
tapes. Don't lie. We have the. I never called
You
you a
didn't call
terrorist.
me a terrorist.
I called you
You
an
didn't say
extremist.
me-
Extremist supporter and lover of terrorists who named his son after a terrorist. Yes, and if
So
you don't like
it's
it,
something
file a
very
lawsuit.
extremely inflammatory to call someone a terrorist. I'm just implying that there are certain people who may be getting a stipend, a monthly paycheck from certain kinds of sources to say
Don't
the
ask-
kinds of things that they say about Islam
Yeah.
and
Don't
about
assume
terrorism
people
and
If you
extremism
cannot
extremism and
prove
so
it,
forth.
if
Can
you
you-
can't prove it, don't imply it.
Yeah, don't. Let's focus on the question. What does the Muslim world need right now? Do you think you answered that? Or
So
you-
I mentioned the biggest issue that's facing the Muslim world today, and it's something that's relevant. We're living in the Western world. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I've lived all across the United States, and this is what I think the Western world needs to hear: that Muslims should be left without meddling, intervention, warfare. Muslims do not need to be saved. All of these justifications that are used to attack and colonize the Muslim world and to suppress Muslims, this is the biggest cause of bloodshed and deformity within Muslim society, is this kind of Western intervention. So I do think that that's the biggest issue that needs to be addressed.
All right.
I agree also that to a certain extent that Western intervention does destroy and demolish the Middle East, and it does give rise to extremist groups who then the other governments will come and find useful to fund them and so on.
Isn't Western intervention what is responsible for ending slavery in the Islamic world?
Correct. And also...
Wait, what are you referring to?
I'm talking about the British Empire forcing countries under its rule to end slavery.
So the British enslaved the Muslims, and then that.
Well, we have different
allowed
definitions
Muslims.
of slavery. Well, you could
But
disagree.
you don't
with
think that colonization and imperialism
But let-
is a
let-
form of slavery?
No.
No,
we can-
okay. Do you at least think it's a bad thing?
Yes.
Oh, you have to think about it. Or do you really think it's a bad thing?
Well,
On par with something else that you think is really bad, like slavery.
Well, no, I think there's some positive that came out of the British Empire when a country that was the subjects. There were negative aspects of it as well, but I think there are better ways of getting those ideas to other places than forcing countries to abide by them, right? But I think the imperialism is a.
So you think?
Hold on, let me finish. Imperialism. Every empire was involved in imperialism. The Arab Empire, the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the English Empire, the Japanese Empire. That doesn't make it okay, but it does mean that it's part of what empires do. But that's not an excuse. And the countries that are under these empires change because of it. There are some positive changes, there are some negative changes. But whatever positive changes that came from these empires, probably could have been achieved in better ways, maybe that doesn't have to necessarily be through because if a country with superior values is ruling over a country with inferior values, maybe there's going to be some positive interaction there, but that doesn't mean that that's okay, right?
How can you rule over a country without violence?
That's what I'm saying. There are better ways, okay?
So how can you influence a country without violence?
Well,
you think that they can? The British Empire should distribute leaflets?
No, well, yeah, that's what I do. I mean, not leaflets, but by true spreading that, like the European values itself didn't came from somebody enforcing it on them. They came up to the realization.
Imperialism and colonialism does mean it was imposed on.
That's what I'm
force.
saying. There are better ways. Just like Europe came to the conclusion that these values works, there are better ways of encouraging these values to other places. But
that's the question.
How is what I'm doing for my entire life through activism. But another point is that British Empire obviously did some very, very nasty stuff, but compared to other empires before it was a mild version of the crimes that they committed. But anyway,
I just want to answer
genocide
your question.
of
I want to answer
famine
your
of
question.
Bangladesh.
I didn't say they didn't.
3 million.
But let him answer.
With regards to intervention, I agree that intervention needs to stop. It's terrible. We haven't seen anything good from Western governments interfering in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. But I do believe that we need to take a look at the different types of interventions. Don't forget, there's a large large minority of people within the Middle East that do want America to come and save them from their government. And we see that in the protests and the chants that take place recently in the Iranian uprisings. There is a large group of Muslims, even though there are small countries such as the UAE and so on, Oman and Kuwait. They want relations with America. They love the British. Their rulers have homes and castles and amazing properties in the Western world, and they come regularly. Even theocrats, they send their children, like the Iranian regime, to study in America and gain citizenship. So there is a level of intervention that is actually welcomed by the Muslims in Muslim countries. And that basically means come, bring your trade, bring your economy, bring your art, bring your, what goods do you have? Take our carpets, let's have this ongoing relation with the Western world, no problem. And there could be some sort of intervention as well when it comes to counterterrorism, when it comes to national security. There should be a level where Western governments and their intelligence services should be able to interfere in the countries of other people in order to prevent a terrorist attack. Now, I did not plan on mentioning this, but I have to. The Israeli Mossad recently went and notified the Australian government about a terrorist plot that was going to take place. I think it was in an airport or an aeroplane. And the Australian government was very open about this. It was all over the media that, hey, there was actually a government that had somehow intervened in our situation. And the same happens with the British and the Americans when, Australia had, throughout its history, many governments tried to come and take over, and then you've had intervention. So when it comes to military intervention, we need to differentiate between moving to the Middle East in order to destroy it, bring out its government, establish a government that we like, and then, take its resources and riches and so on. I don't agree with that. However, there are interventions that the people themselves want. There are good and positive interventions. And, when a government comes from the West, what we see now, they influence the educational curriculums. Many students from the Middle East can then travel, and vice versa. They travel to each other's countries. So I will not wipe out intervention completely, but rather I see it as a big platform and a big, let's say, it's a great way to pave the way for nations to have relations with each other, as opposed to just governments having diplomatic relations with each other. So I will not rule out intervention completely. I don't like the corrupt ones only.
May I go to the next question? I want to ask you about modernity, or else, unless you wanted to add something to this, because I wanted
just a small point to add is, I think that if you think that having spies and intelligence services within the Muslim world is an acceptable form of intervention, I think that is quite outrageous. The CIA, for example, has been involved with overthrowing democratic governments in South America, in the Middle East as well, replacing democratically elected leadership and installing dictators who would rule with an iron fist, brutally suppressing any kind of dissent in order to support Western powers and Western interests. So, if we're saying that the CIA and spy agencies, Mossad, like this is a good presence in the Muslim world, I think that this is outrageous and ridiculous.
I did not say Muslim world.
They always
said
this is my time to talk.
Counterterrorism.
They all claim to be counter-terrorists.
I agree with you.
Even George Bush, he invaded Iraq and killed 1 million people at least, innocent civilians, on the basis of fighting terrorism, the global war on terror. So if that's going to be carte blanche for any kind of involvement, then no, I don't agree with that. You can justify anything on the basis of counterterrorism.
I'm going to move on to the next question, and this is going to be my last question, and after you both answered it...
You won't allow me to... He makes points I need to respond to.
Okay,
you want to move on to...
I didn't even get a full 5 minutes. You just cut me off.
Because you said you wanted to just have something
small. Then he wants to respond, so I should speak for a full 5 minutes, so that he has more to respond to. No, I finished my
You
point.
finished.
No, look, I agree with
Quick
what he
1
said.
minute, wait,
I
1 minute.
definitely agree. I definitely agree that certain people can justify, or certain organizations can justify anything by throwing around the word counterterrorism, and also applying funding through that route. I completely agree, but I genuinely mean genuine counterterrorism efforts. That's the ones I support. Other disguised issues, I have no concern for. I completely oppose, Bush and what he did to Iraq, my people. I mean, I'm against it. My family were killed, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
just leave
completely
it at
against
that.
it.
You guys agree
I
on this?
genuinely meant the real counterterrorism efforts. That's
All
all.
right, next
And I
one.
agree with you on the other points.
Okay, this seems a point of agreement, so let's move on to the next point. What are the problems with modernity? This is something that you wanted to make sure I bring up, so maybe you go first, and then we'll see if the Imam agrees with you or not, okay?
Yeah, so I mean, the problems of modernity are so extensive. I already mentioned the main problem of the dissolution of kinship bonds, the destruction of the family, the destruction of communal authority and communal connection. These are all things that have arisen due to the force and the violent force of modernity. I think another big negative and destructive effect of modernity is the loss of meaning, that people have lost meaning in their lives. They feel like there is no purpose because we don't believe in God. We've been secularized. We don't believe in a communal religion. We don't have a connection with our families because our
You
families...
mentioned these. Do you want to add like new specific examples? Because you already touched on these ones.
Yeah, so I mean, look at the institutionalization of childcare, education, elder care. Look at the average person's life. You're born in an institution, in a hospital. You're immediately taken and put in a nursery. You're immediately then taken home for just a short period of time before your mother has to go back to work. Therefore, you're put into daycare. You're institutionalized apart from your family. You reach a certain age where you go to another institution, the public education system, where you spend the next 12 years of your life. Then you leave your family and go to another institution. Then you go into the corporate world, another institution. You work your whole life. You retire. You don't have any family that you have any connection with because you've spent the vast majority of your waking hours at institutions working. And then you have to be put into an elderly care facility because no one has time to take care of the elderly. So even at the end of your life, you're institutionalized. I mean, one of the greatest tragedies is that you have in the suburbs of the United States, and I'm sure in Australia too, I know that it's definitely a problem in Western Europe and the United States, people who die in their homes and they're not found for months. They're just rotting in their chairs in front of the television because they don't have any family to check up on them and ask them how they're doing, come visit them. Their children have been alienated. Their siblings and extended family have been alienated. And so they just rot in their chairs and they're just discovered when the smell reaches the neighbors. And this is such a problem that even in Japan, it's really has reached epidemic proportions because there's entire companies dedicated to the removal of corpses within apartments and homes because they have such a problem with rotting elderly who they're retired and they're just alone, sitting at home in front of the TV or in front of their computer, and they pass away without anyone noticing until the neighbors smell the corpse. So I think that's the perfect image of what modernity is all about. I would say that fascism is a product of modernity because when you take out religious meaning and religious significance, humans naturally need a higher purpose. Humans naturally need a higher purpose to organize under. They need a kind of hierarchy. They need a kind of communal bond and to feel like they are part of a greater cause. This is something that religion provides, and this is something that in throughout pre-modern history, you had kinship societies based on this shared understanding of God or the divine and the sacred, and all of the kinds of relationships between people in a family and within a community was predicated on this kind of larger meaning. You wipe out that meaning, you destroy religion, and there's a vacuum. And what do people fill with that vacuum? Ultra-nationalism, ultra-jingoism, where we have a white identity, we have a white nation, all kinds of fascistic sentiment is developed out of this vacuum that's created by the destruction of religion, because people are looking for meaning in their lives. They're looking for purpose, and modernity, its liberal secular nature, its anti-theistic nature is what has created room for fascism to grow and thrive. And this is a product of the nation state and the way that it's structured in its opposition to the kinds of kinship relationships found within traditional societies. And a specific example, look at the laws in Western Europe now. They're talking about how it is child abuse to teach your child a religion, a religious tradition, because you're indoctrinating your children. So this is even that kind of influence, that kind of relationship between a child and his parents, to be able to teach a religion. The state wants to intervene and say, no, you cannot.
Okay. All right. So the Imam, and then I think I'm going to respond to this question myself as well for 5 minutes after your 5 minutes, because I need to talk about modernity.
Okay. Mine will be very, very simple. I do share certain conservative values. I believe in them, and I strongly believe in family, and I believe that the government itself should never have the authority to tell a father what he can and cannot teach his child, or a mother her child. And I'm speaking in general, not certain exceptions, because we do have families that do raise extremist children, and this is when we need a stronger force, and in most cases that force is the government that then comes and takes care of such indoctrination and the raising of extremist children. For instance, taking them to extremist mosques, taking them to fundamentalist schools, taking them abroad, holidays, excursions where they meet radical imams who do what they do over there, all these atrocities. And I believe, and we saw with the wave of all these parents that went to join ISIS, took their children along with them. This is a problem. I mean, when you have a father that takes his son, or takes his daughter to Mosul to then have them hold heads of extremists, I believe this is a perfect time for the government to intervene and say, listen, you cannot be teaching your children this. So having an eye out, or an organized society that keeps an eye out on children and also elders, I think it's a good thing. But I really don't agree with the 9 to 5 issue where the father is out from the home or the mother is out from the home, and having a society where the human being is away from home. I believe that takes away from the value and goals of family that are part of human nature. So I agree on that issue, and I think that's the only point I wanted to make, only when it comes to family.
I saw a tweet that was very interesting recently where someone's saying, is my only purpose to work, pay bills, and then die? Is that all that life is meant to be? And I talk to, friends and different people. I go to the grocery store and I'll meet people and talk to them. And it's very sad how depressed people are, given the situation that they're facing with their children. Like someone was telling me that, I never get to see my daughter. She's 13 years old now. She comes home from school. She just has a smartphone and looking at that. She plays, Fortnite, this kind of video game, 8 hours a day, and then she goes to sleep, and that's right. It. And then I go to work, and there's no meaning to that kind of existence, and people recognize that.
I think also the viewers, those that have been raised in such a society will not sort of understand why I'm agreeing with you or why we're somehow agreeing with each other, because we've lived it.
I don't agree
So
with you too.
we've lived the fact that you come home and there's a father and there's a mother, and so have our parents. So we know what's missing in this society. But I guess that will open up another topic of integration and so on.
All right, I'm going to quickly answer this. I'll try to stay in the 5 minutes. I think you two are looking at a much shorter trend compared to what looking at the entire history, because you mentioned families and people being separated. I mean, we live in an age where we don't worry that much about the mom dying at childbirth. This was the mom surviving a childbirth used to be an amazing, great thing. It wasn't that mothers dying from childbirth used to be very common, but they're not anymore. Children get to grow up seeing their mom instead of, you mentioned working. We constantly have to work. Well, throughout history, people constantly had to work. The difference is that they had to constantly work to be able to eat and not starve to death. Now they're constantly working to be able to afford a TV or a better house. I think I take this over that any day. You guys mentioned about being away from your father, being away from your family, not spending time with them. We're living in an age where your work and where you work maybe 1 hour, 10 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours away from where you are. People used to go to war. You didn't know if your husband is going to come back. People used to be when they go do trading, there would be a 6 month, 2 year, 10 year before they come back home to see their family. That's what the norm was. You guys talk about elderly rotting in places, and people don't notice
the war was an exception. War was an exception.
No,
it's not the norm.
War?
No, parents going to war.
No, I'm saying even if they don't go to war, if they go trade, if they go sell stuff, okay. that was a common job. But the amount of time that they would be away would be years. Okay. You're talking about the elderly rotting in their chairs. Well, if they're elderly, given the standards of history, they're lucky that they managed to become elderly, because that was not the norm to reach ages of 70 or 18 before. You would be lucky if you managed to reach age 50 or 60. You're talking about having a higher purpose. The problem is that religion actually has monopolized giving people purpose. If you look at a lot of countries without religion, people are not sensing a lack of purpose. When religion doesn't have monopoly, there's many different options for providing people purpose. Obviously, other than religion, there are other bad ideas as well. Religion is not the only bad idea, but if people point to communism and other bad ideas that is not religious to say, oh, religion is the better option here. But just because there are other bad options, that doesn't mean that religion is the only alternative. Religion has monopolized. Obviously, people do require a sense of significance. They desire a sense of purpose. They desire a sense of community. Desire to feel a sense of meaning. But all of this has been offered and can be offered in a much more efficient and modern way, based on a better understanding of human psychology. And many atheistic Scandinavian countries where there is no absence of religion, we don't see people jumping out of windows and committing suicide, because there are many other options, many better options for people to find a sense of purpose, a sense of significance. And you mentioned fascism and white identity as a result of lack of religion. If you're talking about fascism and white identity politics, this was also part of the norm in human history. Like the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, the Mongolians, the Chinese, they didn't have democracy. They also were fascistic government that religion was the norm there. Fascism was also a part of. Now let me finish. But also this white identity. The Romans thought that they're the superior race. Everybody else is a barbarian. The Persian thought that they're the superior race. Everybody else is the barbarian. So these kind of identity politics, the kind of fascism that you're referring to, was a norm throughout history. In fact, we're seeing it less than ever before. And that was my defense of modernity.
So can I respond to that?
Yeah, and I'm going to just let you, I'm not going to respond to your response, whatever your response is, but after you respond to that, I'm going to let you to, if you want to add anything at the end, if you want 5 minutes to add anything that you think you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say, you could add that as well. So respond to me, but then we'll take your last statements as well.
So I just wanted to respond to the points that you made, Armin, about the continuity between pre-modernity and modernity, and some of the things I mentioned as being a problem with modernity. One thing that I always found interesting about the books 1984, George Orwell's 1984, Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, is that they pointed out a situation where the vast majority of people within a society are happy and they think that they're living fantastic lives and they feel satisfied in every single way, but in reality they're living in a nightmarish dystopia. And I think that that is a very stark and profound message for people in the modern world, that we might experience things as being not so bad and in fact very pleasurable and ideal in many different ways, but nonetheless it is a dystopia that we are occupying. And so you made a couple of distinctions that I think are worth addressing. I don't have any doubt that there are many negative things that happened within pre-modernity, many negative things that might have happened in Muslim history, because not all Muslims were following Islam throughout history and even to this day. But I want us to understand the bigger trend and the bigger impact that modernity, through the use of technology, through the use of nationalism and the coercive power of the police state, the surveillance state, has had on the modern person, the modern human being's condition. And yeah, you can mention all of these negative things with the past, and if you have a purely utilitarian conception of what human purpose is, then you can bring about the most good very simply. Just put all human beings in vats and hook up their brains to a kind of simulation like in the Matrix, and just feed them, pleasure through the brain or maybe through drugs, and they will be in a constant state of bliss biologically. And yeah, you can have that kind of world and you can have that kind of setup very easily. It's within technological capabilities at this point in time. But is that really the kind of world that we want to live in? Is that really the type of future that, as any human, Muslim or non-Muslim, is that the kind of future that we want for ourselves and our children? To me, that seems like the complete destruction and annihilation of human beings and of the human condition. So I don't agree with you that the kinds of things that we see in the world today existed in the same kind of manner in pre-modernity. The kind of atomization and institutionalization which I refer to is something modern, and no doubt people worked in the past, but look at the kind of work that's expected of people today. People work themselves to death. I don't know a single person who works a 9-to-5 job that has never had a complaint with their employer, that has never felt used and abused by their employer. And this is why unions are formed. This is why you have political movements on the basis of employee rights. So there are many things that we can point to. Fascism, yeah, I have no doubt that there are ethnic identities that existed throughout human history. Were they fascist? No, because a part of fascism, a central component of fascism is the nation state, which did not exist in the past. The bureaucratic nation state did not exist prior to the 18th century. And then also technology, the ability to enforce a kind of surveillance and authority from the top down to control people and force them to live in a certain way and abide by the nationalistic government's authority. That totalitarian kind of government did not exist in pre-modernity because you didn't have the technology, first of all. And then also, one characteristic of fascistic regimes is that they seek to obliterate other cultures and they seek to destroy other cultures than the dominant nation's culture. But that's not the case in Islamic history. That's not the case in other, and even Roman history. It's arguable that what the Romans did wasn't to obliterate the different cultures that they ended up ruling over and dominating. They just kept those cultures subservient. So in ways that the culture disagrees or conflicts with the Roman mandate and Roman law, then those are the aspects that need to change. Everything else is left alone, and Romans didn't have this kind of project of dismantling those cultures in the same way that imperialists and liberal, secular, technocratic colonizers and imperialists have unleashed upon the world Muslims, natives, First Nations, and so on and so forth. So there's a big qualitative distinction there that characterizes modernity from pre-modernity. As far as you also mentioned, like people in the past would also die and they get old and die and rot. Yeah, that's true. I'm not denying that people died in the past and became old, but were they alone? Were they in front of a television set in their apartment by themselves and not discovered for 3 months? That was just a symbol of the overall condition that we're suffering from in the modern world.
I mentioned that they would be lucky if they got to get old, but anyways. So now we're gonna just let Imam say anything that he might have wanted to say that he didn't get a chance to, and then we'll do the same with you, and that would be the end of it.
Okay, there were just a few things I wanted to mention. With regards to your question to me, which then the brother commented on my answer. You asked me whether Muslims, what can Islam contribute to society, humanity, the world? And I said that Islam contributes basically what all other religions can contribute. All religions can be interpreted in a negative way and can be interpreted in a positive way and can be utilized in a specific area or field within human history. And we've seen religions evolve in order to serve human history. So Islam is no different. It can be made violent, it can be made peaceful. The same beheading that takes place as a legal sentence in Saudi Arabia is condemned and frowned upon in Kuwait, in Muslim Kuwait. So there are many aspects that we could explore when it comes to what Islam can offer. No different from any other religion, can be used in a good way, can be used in a bad way. Yes, that was the first part of my answer. Now, the second part, which needs clarification, is what can Muslims contribute? And I said that Muslims can contribute in art and education, in music, in all aspects of life. And I elaborated on that previously, but I think the brother misheard me and said that I had said that Islam can contribute to art and music and that Islam should actually contribute to the truth instead. So I just wanted to clarify that. Islam does not contribute to art and music. In fact, art and music are very limited and sometimes even banned in Islamic law. It is Muslims that can contribute to society because they are, of course, better than the fundamentalist teachings that they've been born into. Another matter that you spoke about is that I cancel out the hadith, and you said, how do we know what existed previously? And that if we cancel the hadith, then we can't basically know what existed before. No, I say we need Bukhari. We need Tabari. We need these extremist fundamentalist books. We need them. We need the books of Khomeini. In 100 years, I would be against someone banning Khomeini, or banning the Shalmaghani, or banning the early Shia fundamentalists. I would be against it. I want their books to remain so we can see exactly what happened and not be like them. If we ban these books completely, I would ban them in universities, I would ban them in libraries, because I don't want my child to end up doing a research and being influenced by it. I don't want it to influence curriculums, but I would want it to be accessible for the public to see what a tragedy this is. So I'm not advocating to ban books. I'm saying we learn what happened, what the development of Islam was from these books, but we do not, we don't abide by them. If it says butcher and kill, I'm not going to go butcher and kill. That's not how I see it. Another issue is that the brother said that if you believe in Islam and if you believe in it to be true, then a Muslim would spread the religion of Islam because they believe it to be true. Firstly, we need to understand that religion came to serve humanity, not to serve Muslims or to serve God. Okay? Religion does not serve God. The way you framed it is that if I believe in God, and if you allow me a bit more time, if I believe in God and if I believe in God's message is true, the Holy Quran, then I need to teach this book and spread it. Right? This is wrong. This is serving God. Religion was not sent down to serve God. Religion serves me.
ما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون.
Yes, to worship, no problem. But that is not the purpose of. Are you telling me that your purpose is only to pray and pray to God, worship
that
God?
That verse is addressing all of humanity as a whole.
Yes.
Their purpose.
No problem. So you can.
But you're saying the opposite. You're saying that the purpose of humanity is not to worship
وما
God,
خلقت
or not to
الجن
serve
والإنس
God.
إلا ليعبدون. Did not say وما خلقت المسلمين. All humanity.
I know, that's my point.
Exactly. This comes from a context of God wanting to serve. I'm an Imam. I serve my religion. Why? Because it serves humanity. My organization.
I believe in serving humanity as well.
My organization.
Part of serving humanity is to inform humanity of their creator.
My organization serves humanity. So I serve my organization. I don't serve my God. My religion is here to serve
God?
No, my religion is here to serve me.
You don't care about serving God?
The moment religion wants to kill and butcher, then we go against that belief system. Religion when it emerges, what does it say? We are here to make your life better. We are here to make you better people. They're here to serve us. Prophets are servants of humanity. We don't serve God. God doesn't need me. God doesn't need me to worship and go promote him. He does. He's a king. He has everything. He's an atheist. That's a good point for you now. No, God doesn't need me. Why am I here serving God? I don't need it. That's why all caliphates and theocracies are corrupt. And that's why Muhammad never had a government. Now,
I think you're outing yourself.
Coming back to another matter, which is very important.
You get the same amount of time.
Yes,
sure.
Which is very important. When you were speaking about violence, you said that a society cannot function without violence, and that society does not reject violence. And then you spoke about how police enforce the law. Use that term, enforcing the law, because it has some sort of a violent feel to it. No, we were speaking about Islamic terrorism. Terrorists don't have a law. ISIS came in Iraq, and would you allow ISIS to use the same understanding of violence that you spoke of earlier? How you said that you need to enforce the law. We need violence in society to make sure that everybody falls in line. ISIS did the same thing. They took over the same way all governments take over. At one point, someone took over some land, and then constitutions were established. So did ISIS. They took over Mosul, and they brought their caliphate. So what now? Because they have a law, and they have a law that you can't do this, otherwise we'll chop your hand off. A taxi driver can't charge more than what the caliph allows, otherwise we'll behead him. Mannequins need to wear burqas. What? Because they have a law, and they enforce the law by violence. That means it's okay? No. And in Saudi Arabia, they behead people by a violent law. Does that mean it's okay? This is very wrong. Just because violence is given the terminology of a law, or is considered by a group that it's a law, it does not make it right. You cannot justify this, otherwise it would apply to ISIS as well. ISIS would turn around and say, we're an establishment. The people clapped for us when we first came in, and people love us. There are many who come from around the world to fight for us, and we have a law, and we are terrorists, and let's do what we want. It doesn't work like that.
So before you start, can you mention what Quran verse did you say in Arabic, and what's the translation for the people that don't know Arabic? Which Quran verse was it?
I think it's in Surah Al-Dhariyat.
Okay.
I'm not sure. It's a very famous verse.
What's the translation? Can you give the translation?
It means this is God speaking. I did not create jinn and humans except to worship me.
Okay.
Except to ya'budun.
And this is not Muslims. This is all humans.
Yes, meaning insan, humanity.
Right. So all humans are supposed to worship Allah. That's the problem.
Because we belong to God. God has created us, and we are in a position of being a creation of God, and so part of our purpose is to worship God and to seek the truth and to be believers in our Creator.
All right. So
to avoid that and to be apart from God is going to hurt us in this life. It's going to lead to many kinds of problems that we can discuss.
All right. Your points. 7 minutes.
Okay, yeah, so I want to just mention some of the points that we kind of glossed over and we didn't get into really the details. So I want to clarify that the point about there's hadith in Sahih Bukhari regarding the goat eating a certain leaf, which a certain verse of the Quran was written on. Yes, this is something that you will find in Sahih Bukhari. But the Quran was not transmitted through paper and pen. We didn't get the Quran like through a USB drive that has been preserved historically. The Quran has been recited. It's a oral tradition, and it has been memorized from the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, in his lifetime. Not just 1, 2, 3, but dozens. And they taught their students, and so the recitation of the Quran and the standard recitation of the Quran has been preserved throughout history through this method of memorization and authorization through sanad. And so this is one of the greatest achievements within human history of an intellectual tradition that is able to preserve itself through a system of authorization, isnad, and recitation and memorization and so forth. So this is talking about the epistemology of Islam, which is important to study and understand, and even non-Muslim academics will recognize this, and that's why today you have hundreds and thousands of Muslims all over the world who all recite the same Quran. It's not because the Quran is not preserved because it's written on certain pieces of paper. It's preserved because it's an oral tradition.
But it
fails. So that's the first point. The second point about the satanic verses, this is an issue that's going very deep into the weeds of Islamic scholarship, but there are differences of opinion on whether this whispering of Satan to the Prophet, peace be upon him, certain verses, whether this is authentic, whether it actually happened. Muslim scholars disagree. So this is something that we should be aware of. Some scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah said that this is actually proof that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was a true prophet of God. And this incident is arguably referenced in the Quran itself. When there's one verse of the Quran where God says, and we did not send before you any messenger or prophet, except that when he spoke, Satan threw into his speech some misunderstanding. But Allah, God, abolishes that which Satan throws in, and then Allah makes precise his verses, and Allah is knowing and wise. So this is something that the Islamic intellectual tradition had no problem whatsoever in explaining and justifying, and it's not a attack on or it's not a successful criticism or really a compelling criticism of the coherence and the preservation of the Quran. About capital punishment, again, I asked if you're a pacifist or if you are in disagreement with capital punishment. I'm from Texas, and we do have capital punishment as the law for people who are committing heinous crimes, serial killers, people who are mass shooters, who are killing many people, who are causing all kinds of destruction. And this is one of the types of things that capital punishment should deter And so I think that there is you can easily argue for the moral defensibility of capital punishment. Now, if you agree on the defensibility of capital punishment, like many Americans do, and see the logic of that, then it doesn't matter how that is taken out, whether it's with lethal injection, which is arguably very painful to have poison pumped into your veins, or the electric chair, or beheading. I mean, this is something that I don't see any kind of moral problem with. It's just something that people like to bring up as if it's some kind of gruesome act, but I don't see it as inherently more gruesome than any other kind of capital punishment. So that is that point. And I had another point that I want to make. Oh, violence and state coercion. So there's a very interesting and compelling statement from a Harvard Law School professor, I believe Duncan Kennedy, who said that every time that lawmakers make a law, this is another opportunity for violence. This is another opportunity for violence. And this is explained pretty shockingly with an example of a parking ticket. For example, there are laws against parking in certain zones within a city, within a metropolitan area. How is parking laws, traffic laws, an opportunity for violence, state violence? Well, if you don't pay, if you park in one of these prohibited zones and you get a ticket, what if you decide not to pay this ticket? Well, the court can decide, the magistrate can decide to put a lien on your house, meaning that they can foreclose your house because you have outstanding parking violations that you haven't paid. When you have a lien on your house and your house is foreclosed, that means the state can sell your house in order to recoup its money. And so the state can sell your home, and if they do so, they'll send a sheriff to remove you from your home so that the new owners can move in. If you refuse to move, the sheriff can use force to arrest you and take you out of your home, pull you out of your home. If you resist that, the sheriff has the authority to use deadly force against you. So this is how even something like parking violations is an opportunity for violence. And that's why the modern state is the most violent state. The modern state is the most violent state because look at all the laws that are restricting and controlling human behavior. Even how a person can walk across the street. If you jaywalk, okay, and this is not theoretical. There are many examples of police brutality where the police officer will go to the African American who has jaywalked and say, well, what are you doing here? You're violating of the law. And the African American will say, or Hispanic or other minority, well, I was just minding my own business. I didn't realize that this was a problem, and they'll be violently detained and even killed. So this is something that is characteristic of the modern state and the proliferation of law after law after law controlling how human beings can live their lives. This didn't exist in the past. You didn't have this kind of bureaucracy. If you look at books of fiqh, if you look at Islamic law, it can fit within a manual, a small text. Whereas if you look at the legal code of any
given that your time is
state,
up, can I just quickly comment on that? Because you're comparing, first of all, it's interesting that you're comparing what's supposed to be God's perfect law to human law and pointing to fault in human law as a way to excuse God's law. And another point is that that step-by-step process that you're saying parking.
The point was about violence, right?
Okay.
Violence is something that we should reject.
But,
and so I'm pointing out that if we have a problem with violence, then the modern state should be the focus of our critique and our denunciation.
First of all,
because the modern state is more violent than any other social organization that has existed.
Nobody here defends everything modern governments do, right? And second of all, even with the examples that you give, you compare that step-by-step parking ticket and then going through all the steps that you said, you're comparing that to a religion that teaches you that if I say, hey, I changed my mind, I don't think Muhammad was the prophet of God, you agree that the punishment for somebody like me is death according to Islam. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I've gone on record saying that apostasy, the punishment for that is very clear in Islamic law, and there's all kinds of regulations based on that. It's not about vigilante violence and Muslims going and
that's justified according to you.
Within an Islamic state, okay, a proper Islamic state,
within
legitimate Islamic state, yes, it is morally, it is a part of Islam first of all, and it is morally defensible to say that those who leave the faith will face capital punishment if they don't
So you
renounce
think
their
killing
leaving
me
of the
under
faith.
a perfect Islamic state is justified?
So if you were within an Islamic state, legitimate Islamic state, and what would happen is that you would be detained, okay, for announcing your apostasy. And there's a good reason for this. Just like we have laws that sanction certain kinds of thoughts and certain kinds of behaviors. Like, for example, Holocaust denial. Within Europe, for example, it's illegal. If you go and start denying the Holocaust and saying that, yeah, we need to be neo-Nazis and we need to support Hitler and we need
Let's
to...
focus on this.
No, this is very relevant because that is just a thought, right? It's just an idea.
Yeah,
to deny the Holocaust is just an idea, just like renouncing Islam.
I don't
is an
support
idea.
banning that either. But
Okay, so
yeah.
you don't think that
But let's
Holocaust now
focus
should
on-
be banned. But look at the effects of that. Look at the effects on society. You have a society that's more conducive to accept anti-Semitism. You have a
do they get
society
killed?
that's... They're imprisoned, and if you refuse to
No.
go, you refuse
Do
to
they
be
get
imprisoned, you can.
Is the
Police
first
are authorized to
verdict a kill?
use deadly force.
Yeah, no, you're not answering my question. Is denying the Holocaust in those European areas something that constitutes an immediate court verdict for one's beheading, stoning, or killing?
In Islamic law, it's not
No.
immediate
It is.
stoning, beheading. No,
It
it's
is.
not.
It is. Under some schools of thought, they say go and try and convince him to come back to Islam. Under
Yes.
some. Not under Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, not under ISIS. We've seen the videos.
Look, I'm talking about traditional Islam. I don't
They are,
endorse
ISIS is traditional
I don't
Islam.
endorse what ISIS
Let's not
is.
go back.
ISIS is
Okay,
traditional
let's not
Islam.
go back to that.
We're not going back. But I'm very surprised by his answer.
No, but you didn't let me finish my answer.
Let
So
me
in
finish.
terms of Holocaust denial, people generally, maybe not Armin, maybe Armin is fine with a society full
But
of
forget
Holocaust
people,
deniers.
let's focus
Let me
on
finish-
Islam.
Let me finish what I'm saying.
It's what about
Maybe
Islam?
Armin is okay with a society of Holocaust deniers and anti-Semites and neo-Nazis coming into power and organizing. Maybe
What? I
that's
did not
something
say that. Come on. I did not say that.
So you think that they should be broken up? Neo-Nazi shouldn't have the right to self-assembly. They shouldn't have the right to, have rallies.
If you look at in Germany,
promoting-
they were banned, and there's a rise in anti-Semitism in Germany. So
No,
banning their voice is not going to help.
I'm very confused.
Yes.
No, well,
I'm
let me
very
explain.
confused.
Let
You know why?
let me explain.
Because, please explain to me
you're-
how
the
who
point,
gives
the
you
point
the
is,
right?
the point is that certain thoughts, we should all agree that certain thoughts are very noxious.
Okay.
Certain thoughts are very dangerous.
Okay.
Okay. You're constantly talking about counterterrorism,
Okay.
right? So there are certain extremism, as you call it, that society should punish or prohibit. That these kinds of
We
ideas
know.
should not be. Why? Because we don't want a society full of anti-Semites and racists and
But
neo-Nazis.
by killing them?
No. We prohibit those kinds of expressions of ideas through the law. And similarly, Islamic law says that apostasy, leaving Islam, is something that is so damaging and so dangerous and causes so much harm.
Where
Because-
does Islam say that?
No, that
let
what
him
was his
answer.
conclusion? He was saying that we need to do what? It's so harmful that we need to do what?
that we have to have high penalties for it.
And what is
In
the
the
penalty?
same way that
What is the
other
penalty?
The
Death.
penalty is you are someone is taken by the authorities and questioned, like, did you actually renounce
And then I say
Islam?
yes. I say yes. What
Yeah,
happens?
so then you have 3 days to change your mind, and if you insist, then it's a death penalty.
Death penalty.
During these 3 days, they're already preparing your
Just
your
like
funeral.
if you go to Germany and you say I'm a Holocaust denier,
you get killed.
they will say that okay, this is against the law. We're taking you
Do
to
they
prison,
kill
and
you?
then you say no, I resist, and
Do
then
they
they'll
ki-
kill you if you resist that. Yeah.
No, if you no, it was not
This
the
is
same.
what-
Islam
It was
not the
guarantees
same.
the death if you resist. Germany does not guarantee death. Maybe they kill you, maybe they don't.
You don't have to be in Germany. You can be in any country.
No,
if
if-
you resist the police's mandate,
Okay.
they're authorized to use deadly force.
No,
because
that's not the
and
same.
kill you.
Wait, so you're saying because the police have the right to shoot, right? Have the right to shoot, then the Islamic Caliph has the right to behead someone for leaving the religion. Is that what you're saying?
The point is, let's focus on the point, is that certain ideas, let's come to a consensus.
They don't have the right to deadly force
Let's come to a
unless you
consensus.
actually
Let's
cause
come to a
harm.
consensus. There are certain ideas that are so dangerous. We can have a debate on whether leaving Islam is dangerous or threatens a person's well-being, threatens a community's or a nation's well-being. We all assume, we all agree that Holocaust denial or for anti-Semitism if that was proliferated throughout society, this would be a bad thing. Just the ideas, or racism.
So we kill him.
If that proliferated through society, that would be bad. Do we agree on that? Do you think that
Right.
white supremacy?
Yes, it's bad.
It's bad. Okay, so should there be laws to prevent that?
To prevent
should there be laws that?
No problem, but you don't kill.
Okay, so laws are okay.
So is
So then
eating too
we're
much
drawing
candy.
the lines in different places. You think that it should be enforced? Laws should be implemented.
Okay.
Laws should be implemented, and then
You are
enforced by-
comparing two different things
Yes.
that have nothing to do with each other. You are comparing a man-made law in Europe regarding hating certain ways of thinking. You're comparing that to the justified law of God of beheading anyone who writes a book like this or leaves the religion. Answer me. Who gives you that right?
And again, the comparison is not
I know.
at all
I know.
similar.
It is the same,
I
because
just-
you
just
would
answer me,
you
please.
just accepted that you would endorse laws that restricted certain ideas from spreading.
Human beings don't have
I'm
God.
in agreement. You're in
Listen.
complete agreements with Islamic
Yes.
law because Islamic
No.
law has laws that
you need to
prevent
understand-
the spread of certain ideas.
Let me.
Human beings don't
So what's
have
the difference?
God.
Explain
Human
to me.
beings-
Explain
Can
to
I-
me the
I'm
difference.
I'm explaining. Human
Because you
beings-
agree with one set of laws.
I'm explaining.
But you have a problem with
Yes.
Islamic law. So I'm saying these are the
The
same kind of thing.
laws, the laws we have here are man-made. We vote for the laws and we elect our leaders. This
you
is
can't
on
vote.
a human level. On a human level, these laws cannot be compared to Sharia law that comes from God, that nobody can question. The law you are referring to in Europe can be debated, can be cancelled, can be made void, and can be objected. Right? The law of God can't. If Armin is killed, he's done. Nothing can undo that. Now I have a question.
So
you
if
answer me.
Hitler came to power through democracy, right?
Hitler is not a caliph.
He came through. Donald Trump came to power through a democratic
Donald
election.
Trump can
if
do-
tomorrow Donald Trump says
Donald
that,
Trump is
look,
not doing
we
it in
are
the name of
fine,
God.
Anti-Semitism
something in?
should be something that we don't
Wait.
have any kind
I
of
wanna
laws
finish.
against, or we don't have any sanctions
You
against
can't
people who
justify.
are
You can't justify.
anti-Semites.
You can't justify human
No,
law with
explain
God's
to
law.
me. Explain to me,
I'm
like-
explaining. You cannot justify human law with God's law. Now, I have a question. Do you think that Armin, when you do think he will be killed under an Islamic state, what is your evidence for that?
I mean, this was the consensus position of all the schools of
Give
thought.
me one. Give me one name, one position. Give me one verse.
The
Give me.
school of Imam Ahmad, the school of Imam
Where did he get
Shafi'i,
it
the
from?
school of Imam Malik.
Wait, who is he?
I mean, they have their justifications, such as the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying that if someone changes his religion, then kill him.
Wait, show me.
That's.
It's in Bukhari.
Show me.
Well,
I mean, this is not even all of Bukhari. You
No,
only have like 3 volumes.
The Kitab al-Hudud is here. The chapter of punishments is in
you
here.
know it's in Bukhari. What
No,
you say.
I know. Where did Bukhari get it from?
This goes back to you deny all of these texts. So what?
Show
you
me from
want
the
to debate
Quran.
that?
I don't deny the Quran.
But Islamic law is not just based on the Quran.
But
There's
many
4 different
hudud do.
sources.
Many of the hudud are
Yes,
the
many
important-
of them
such
do,
as
and others
adultery.
don't.
Adultery.
Yeah, zina.
Can you show me the stoning verse
Certainly.
that the goat ate was in the Quran? Show me the other ones.
Can I get some points in because you guys?
The point is, your beheading of people has no basis in the religion except that the fathers-in-law of Muhammad did it, and therefore you believe their appointment is
Well, you
divine.
you said the punishment for zina, for lashing, is in the
It's in
Quran.
the Quran.
You don't agree with that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, because you don't think the Quran is perfect. So
No, it's not because I don't think it's perfect. It's because
you said that's not perfect.
it's because the verse is not unlimited to time
Right.
and place. The verse is limited.
We need to. We need.
Yes, it's limited.
we need to cut-
Hold
we
on.
need to
The
go.
verses in the Quran are theological. They're jurisprudential, and you cannot come and take a theological verse and say yes, this applies to every place, and take a jurisprudential ruling and say apply. The chopping of the hand. I'll ask you a question. A thief. Hold on. A thief.
We need to go.
A thief. Do you believe that a thief's hand should be chopped? According
Yeah.
to the-
I
No, we
mean,
can't get into
absolutely,
that. We
of
can't.
course.
I had to get some
One
words in,
second,
and they.
one
I
second.
agree with
we
all
don't need
of
to-
gonna
the
finish.
hudud. I agree
Okay.
with all of the hudud.
Okay.
Every aspect of
Okay.
Islamic law. But
So
you have to have
you
the,
chop the
correct
hand.
I really
nuance
need
for
to get this in, and
1
we're
second.
running out of
10
time. And I
seconds.
have
10 seconds.
10 seconds.
I think
If
a lot of
you-
Americans actually would
if-
support chopping of the hands
Okay.
when
If
when
you chop
people
the hand, how
have-
do you pray? How do you pray as a Muslim? If you chop the hand.
You can pray seated.
No, you
can pray
can't.
lying
You
down.
can
Yes,
only pray seated when you cannot
10
place the
seconds.
7
My
positions.
turn. My
You
turn.
contradicted you. You cannot pray without 2 palms on the ground.
This has to be. I have to respond to this. This is the last point. First of all, just
Chop people's heads off.
restricting, like just because we want to restricting that doesn't mean we want to kill them. If restricting and killing could be used interchangeably, if I said we need to restrict children's access to candy, you're like, well, why not just kill kids that want to eat too much sugar? Let me restrict. Just because I'm okay with restricting things, that doesn't mean killing is a solution. Also, wait.
You missed the point.
No,
You're misconstruing the argument.
Okay, so so another thing is that
You have to understand the argument before you can critique it.
Okay, just so I won't bring my 2 other points, but just respond to that.
I started with the point that we all agree that there are certain ideas.
Yes, but
that should be restricted.
But they're different ways fighting.
Such as racist ideas.
That's not the point. The point is that I understand your point. My point is that you're focusing on the agreement that is obvious. Like obviously, some ideas need to be.
Well, it's not obvious to neo-Nazis.
No, let me.
It's not obvious
let me
to
finish.
white supremacists.
Obviously, we have to fight some ideas. We disagree with the method. The method of fighting ideas is what we're disagreeing with.
No, we agree.
And killing is not
look,
part. Killing. Here's what we disagree. Killing should not be part of the solution of fighting bad ideas.
No.
That's
people have.
We are out of time. But give one more. 10 seconds.
Well, the thing is that the implications of what people say when it comes to racism or misogyny, they desire to have strict sanctions and strict penalties on racists, white supremacists, and anti-sexists. And we see that played out in society. Like Donald Sterling, the owner of the Clippers, he expressed in private racist views. What was the reaction? There was extreme justified reaction against his racism that ended up him losing his ownership of the Clippers. He faced many kinds of social consequences that are in line with loss of life.
Sorry, that was good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I discuss in depth on my website. And
Armin, don't get killed, man.
Okay, so thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to shake your hand?
Of course.
All right. And where can people find you again?
At Imam of Peace on Twitter.
Where can people find you?
They can go to my website, muslimskeptic.com. And I'm on social media just using my last name, Haqiqatjou. You can find me, and I have more detailed arguments because you can take some of the things I say and make them look extreme because there's not the larger academic discussion about the context of these very complicated, nuanced issues.
Go to his website because his last name is impossible to figure out how to spell. But website.
Persian last name.
Okay, so we did touch on a lot of important stuff, but obviously all of us wanted to touch on some topics that maybe we didn't get a chance to. I think these are topics that we might want to review this and see where we could move forward from here. I think even though maybe we all of us were unhappy with some parts, I think overall that we got a lot of content out of this and a lot of good information. I think everybody got a chance to express at least a lot of the views that they wanted to express.
Yeah.
So I think overall this was really good. So thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you for having us, Armin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.